Hey guys, I'm Nathan with Duck River Honey, and I caught 2 swarms out of this tree last year. Today I'm going to talk about where to put your swarm traps to maximize your chances of catching honeybee swarms while also minimizing your time and aggravation in putting them up, taking them down, and checking your traps. This is the third in a series of videos on swarm trapping, so if you've missed the first or second one, then I'll link to those in the description, and I really recommend that you watch those before you watch this one because everything will make more sense. The first one talks about the different types of traps, what bees are looking for. The second one goes into how I'm baiting and luring those traps, and this one is going to talk about where to put them. So I'm going to walk through key points in placing your swarm traps, and then at the end of the video I will take you to different locations that I'm placing swarm traps this year and show you in detail why I'm choosing those specific locations. Now while you're at it, hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications. This is a series of videos. It will take me all the way through the swarm season so you can see which traps catch, which don't, and my thoughts all through the season. To get started, I really want to talk about some strategy, and it's really a coverage strategy. So when you think about coverage, a hive will typically have a forage area that is somewhere around a 2-mile radius. So 4-mile diameter area, they'll cover pretty well. So if you look at a map, I actually look at where my swarm trap is, and I'll draw a 2-mile radius circle around it, and that gives me an idea of my coverage. And I don't want too many of those swarm traps overlapping in a specific area unless I know that there's a really good chance of catching multiple swarms in that spot. The reason for that is I really want to get out and get into different populations of bees. I don't want to oversaturate an area with traps, put 5 traps in a spot where there's only the potential of catching 1 or 2 swarms, for instance. Now I'll use that as a lead in to this, and this is which swarms are most important to catch. This is a strategy point that I want to make. I've got 9 hives up on top of the hill here, and they're very strong. And I am implementing my swarm prevention strategy already. I'll link to a video on that if you want to see what I'm trying to do. Now, one of the things that I really need for my spring management and swarm prevention strategy to work well is boxes of drawn honeycomb. And I don't have that. So there's a really good chance that the wheels are going to come off of this thing and my hives are going to swarm. And in my mind, I've got time and money and worry and investment in these hives. So if they do swarm, it's more important for me to catch my own bees than it is for me to catch anyone else's bees. Another point to make here is I am familiar with my own bees. I know what their temperament is. I know they're productive. I know for the most part they're good bees. And if I am going out somewhere else to catch bees, I don't know what I'm catching. You know, I don't live in an area that has Africanized honeybees, but if you do, then be wary of the swarms that you catch. Make sure that you test them pretty well because you don't want to get bees that have some naughty traits. So another point of consideration is time and efficiency of putting up your traps, checking your traps, things like that. And when you think about this, I don't want to have a 30-mile one-way drive to check one swarm trap and then have to come back. So what I'm doing is working it into my schedule. I have to pick my kids up from day school through the week, and what I'm doing is I'm leaving to go get them in town and going out from my house in one direction, and I'm making a loop and coming back in another direction. So I can check half my swarm traps going to get the kids, and then I can check the other half of them on the way home. And along that route, I am drawing 2-mile circles and trying to get my traps to not overlap by too much. And by doing this, I'm able to actually identify gaps in my coverage and see if I know someone in that area that I can get permission to put traps up on. So looking at it from a coverage and strategy standpoint, I think I've got a pretty sound strategy. And I think that your strategy is going to be different from mine because you're in a different area, you're a different beekeeper, different person, all that stuff. But I wanted to go through what I'm thinking here in case it helps someone else put together a strategy that will work for them. I'm sure it'll be different, but I'm hoping that this helps. So moving on to how to pick a specific tree to place your swarm trap, there are really 6 things that I look for, and those are going to be access, habitat, edge, flight path, water, and shade. Now there's really 2 types of access, legal and physical, and those are different. You can legally be able to access property that you can't physically access or can't physically access very easily. And sometimes you can physically access property that you don't have the legal right to be on. So you've got to have both. Now, on legal access, I'm going to break that down into public land and private land. And I'm going to disclaim that this video will be seen in multiple states, multiple countries, and you need to know the laws of your location and abide by them. So I don't plan to put any swarm traps up on public land, and that's for several reasons. The first is proximity. I simply don't have public land close enough to me that it's efficient for me to check. Second would be theft. So there are a lot of people out there that just love to mess with other people's stuff, love to take other people's stuff. So if I were on public land, I would not put swarm traps up next to the road or where they could be checked from a vehicle. I would get back away from the road, put them up. That means I'm going to be using ladders more than likely. It would drastically increase my time involved in checking them, and it's just less efficient. Another note is if you are putting up traps where they can be seen from the road easily, I would paint them a drab color, even a camouflage color, just something that you may want to think about. So you need to be confident in your knowledge of the laws if you're going to put swarm traps up on public land. And what I would do if I were going to, say, put up a trap on a wildlife management area is I would find the person who would write me a ticket if I did break the law, and I'd ask them about it. So in my situation, that would be the local game warden. I'd give them a call and tell them what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it and when and all that stuff, and get an opinion from them. And they'll usually tell you if it's okay or if it's not. So it's always good to contact the person who would be writing you the ticket before you do something, because if they say it's okay, it's probably going to be okay. I plan to put up all of my swarm traps on private property, and that begs the question of how do you get access to private land? Well, I'm a bit of a special situation because my family has lived here since 1812. So we've got a lot of relatives and friends and family and people that we know through church. So I have tapped all of those networks. And again, if you think back to my loop and the coverage strategy, I look for gaps in that coverage and then see if I know someone who owns property in that area and see if I can get a swarm trap put in specific locations that I'm targeting. So the way that I'm getting access is I just ask for it, just ask them if it's okay for me to put up a swarm trap, and they usually ask, well, what is a swarm trap? And I say it's like a big birdhouse that I hang in a tree, and if the bees like it, they'll move in. And then I can take them down and take them home and give them a very good life. And I will usually tell them that if I catch a swarm on their property, then I'll give them a bottle of honey for every swarm that I catch. I think that's good for them, good for me. You know, I'm getting a fairly expensive package of bees for free, and they're getting a bottle of honey. So that works well. I have had a couple people be a little bit reluctant about it, so I explained to them that, you know, if it's a drought year, a wild swarm moving into a tree has got maybe a 25% chance of survival. If it's a wet year, a good flight weather year, then that chance of survival may go up to 75%. But if I take them home and care for them, their survival rate's probably 90% plus. So they're going to have a good life with me. I did have one landowner show concern for me taking bees out of the area. She's a gardener and wants plenty of bees for pollination. So I made a deal that if I catch more than one swarm there, I'm going to leave a box for a swarm to live in and just have a hive that I very lightly maintain for her. And that way it's a win-win. I've got a really good, what I think is a really good area to catch bees that I wouldn't otherwise have access to, and she's going to have plenty of pollination for her garden. Another consideration on access is physical access. I like good roads. I don't like gates. I don't like fields that turn muddy that you can't drive through because you'll rut them. So think about those sorts of things. I don't like having to walk to check traps. I don't like ladders. I want to be efficient in my time and energy. So the easier it is to put them up and check them and access them, the faster all that is, the better. I do have a couple spots where I'll have a gate to go through. One spot may even have 2 gates depending on where the cattle are at the time. So when I go to areas like that, I want to make sure it's a good area for bee populations, and I want to have multiple traps there. So I increase my chances of catching. It just makes it more efficient. That brings me to my second criteria, which is habitat. And what I'm looking for in an area, that 2-mile area surrounding this swarm trap, is a lot of diversity. I want to see big timber tracts. I want to see fields and row crops and pastures and overgrown fields with goldenrod and fall asters. I want to see all of that stuff. I like to see river bottoms and creek bottoms and things like that. So, in my opinion, the big blocks of timber, especially if it's rural, are sort of a sanctuary for feral colonies. That provides them with a lot of potential nest sites, which is a big thing that they need. And then if you've got all that diversity of habitat, you've got food blooming for bees all through the year. So, in my opinion, that increases the likelihood that there are feral colonies there. So to catch bees, there have to be bees there. And there's really 2 ways for there to be bees there. There can be feral populations, or there can be other beekeepers. And this gets into some ethical questions and things like that. But if you're in a city area, a more urban area, or there's a beekeeper nearby, there will be bees in the area. That beekeeper's probably lost some swarms that will go and live in a hollow tree somewhere. So they are constantly restocking the feral population every year. Now, I don't personally want to catch swarms that are coming out of another beekeeper's hives because I don't know what kind of bees they've got. I like tough bees, bees that can overwinter here, that are used to our conditions. And if you're getting swarms from someone's hives that came from a package and they were overwintered in South Florida and fed sugar syrup and constant mite treatments, those probably aren't very tough bees that are locally adapted. So that's not really what I'm after. Another consideration is if you set up a swarm trap next to another beekeeper and they watch a swarm leave their hive and go into your swarm trap, and you open the swarm trap up and you've got a marked queen in there, well, you've got an ethical question on your hands. In my opinion, it's better to err on the side of being a good neighbor than it is to sweat over one swarm. But you'll have a decision to make if you get into that sort of situation. If you are in a more urban area, I really think you're doing a service if you put swarm traps up, because if a swarm moves into your swarm trap instead of moving into someone's eaves or soffit, then you're doing them a favor. So I would encourage you, if you're in an urban area, to put swarm traps up just to keep bees out of people's houses. The third thing I want to talk about would be edge or lines. So right here, I am on the edge of the woods. The field is right in front of me and over to my left, and I'm sort of right in the edge between a big block of timber and open ground. Other good places can have lines, such as fence rows or tree lines or farm roads or power line right-of-ways, things like that. I think it may be a bee flight path, but it seems like they find the swarm traps better and easier if you're in the edge between 2 types of habitat, and especially they key in on lines. So I think that could be for 2 reasons. Either it is a flight path thing and they're just more likely to find your swarm trap, or they could prefer nest sites that are on the edge of 2 habitat types. So one of those two, I'm not sure which. I've not seen the science or the research on it. If anyone knows of any articles that talk about that, I'd like to read them, so leave that in the comments if you would. The next point I want to talk about is flight path. And think of flight path as prominence. If you're in a field and you're looking at a tree line, there'll usually be one or two trees that just stick out. It's not brushy around them. There's not too many limbs. They just kind of stick out. They're very visible. Right now, there is no obstruction in front of me. There is a clear flight path from this swarm trap out into the field. So I think bees really like that. I think they may be less likely to find a swarm trap if it's buried in brush, and they may not prefer it as much because it is harder for them to come and go through that brush. It slows them down. So look for a prominent, visible spot to put your swarm trap. The next thing I'm really looking for is water. And here in Tennessee, we get 55 to 60 inches of rain a year, so there's water pretty much everywhere. It's hard to find a spot where you can't have water within a quarter mile. But I've got the river just about 300 yards away from me, and there's another creek at the bottom of the hill. There's another creek over here. So there's lots of water available. And that's something that I do think is important. I think bees don't want to go far to water if they don't have to. And I think they very likely are going to prefer a nest site that has water nearby. The last thing that I'm looking for in placing a swarm trap is shade. And this site here is in partial sun right now, but when the canopy gets out on the trees, it's pretty shaded all day. And this comes from Dr. Seeley's work, Bait Hives for Honeybees. He says that swarms may abandon bait hives placed in full sun. So he actually saw that they moved in, but then it got too hot during the day and they would move out pretty shortly. So try to place your swarm traps in at least partial shade if you can. All right, guys, so that covers the main points of what I'm looking for in placing a swarm trap. So now I'm going to walk you through some swarm trap sites and walk through this list and show you why I'm choosing to place these swarm traps. So I'll show you guys a couple different ways to hang these swarm trap platforms. And you'll see that I've got a large hole drilled here at the top. Well, that is so you can use a nail or a screw and put that in the tree and then hang that. And that doesn't really support the platform. What it does is it holds it until you can get the ratchet strap on it. Holding this thing up and getting the ratchet strap around the tree and tightened down with two hands is pretty tough to do. So that makes it a lot easier. Now, this being a walnut tree and it being fairly valuable for timber and me planning on buying a sawmill, I don't really want to put unnecessary holes in this tree. And when I'm on someone else's property, I definitely don't want to put holes in trees. I don't want to wear out my welcome or be a bad neighbor. So what I can do is use two ratchet straps. Just hook these two together, close to where I want the thing to go, and I'll hook one into the other one and then just get that loosely hung here. Now, if that hook right there won't go through the hole on the swarm trap platform, I can just take a loop of cord like that, make a lark's head, and hang it there. And that's going to hold it while I get the other ratchet strap up. I'll come under this cross brace with the ratchet strap so that it can't slip. Now I can remove this upper ratchet strap. Get my cord out. And that is pretty well hung. And set my swarm trap in. There you go, pretty simple. So this trap, from an access standpoint, obviously I can back the truck up to it. It's next to a farm road. Habitat, it is next to some pastures. There's a big block of woods nearby. It's also about a quarter mile from my home apiary, so this would be one that would very easily catch a swarm if I happen to lose one. From a line or edge standpoint, it's next to a very straight farm access road. It's on the edge of the woods and the field. Flight path, very clear flight path on this one. It's very likely bees are going to find it. And water, there's a pond about 50 yards away from it. I think this will be a good spot. So this swarm trap is on the home farm. It's about a quarter mile from my apiary. Physical access is good. It's in a field edge that I can drive to. It's in a tree stand, so not too hard to get up and down. Habitat is very diverse. It's right on the river bluff. So the river's right down there. A lot of trees nearby, open fields. It's also next to my apple orchard and in a food plot that I planted with white clover. So this will be an area that bees frequent. So from an edge perspective, it's on the edge of the field, good flight lines, water nearby, and it will be shaded. So this swarm trap is on the home farm and it has good access. In fact, it has really good access. It also has a lot of bees nearby because it's in my apiary. Habitat, of course, is going to be really good. There's a lot of bees nearby. It's on an edge, it's a tree line, and has good flight path. Water is nearby. The river's only about a quarter mile away, and this will be in full shade when the canopy's on the trees. You may notice that I am putting numbers on my swarm traps. That's to help me remember which one is which as far as my baiting test goes. So odd numbers are getting lemongrass and the Man Lake lure, and even numbers are going to get nothing but Swarm Commander. So I actually did catch a swarm in this tree last year, and I think it's because there's a big block of timber that goes nearly a mile in that direction. It's very rugged, very steep, hard to do anything in there, and I think that that's sort of a repository or a sanctuary for feral bees. And the bees that I got out of here are really good bees. They're gentle, they're very productive. They came through winter with heavy hives. They've just been, they've got lower mite loads than most of my bees. So I've been real pleased with them. All right, so why I've got this trap here. Well, first and foremost, I caught a swarm here last year, so usually spots are good year after year. The entrance is south facing, got really good access, both legal and physical. Habitat is phenomenal, it's extremely diverse. Overgrown field here behind it, really good fall forage source, Dutch white clover, henbit, a lot of stuff around here. It's in an edge, tree line, really good flight path. Water nearby, creek and ponds, and it's shaded. So I would not be surprised to catch another swarm here this year. So access to this swarm trap, I'd say, is pretty good. It's about 40 yards from my front door. It's in my side yard. And the habitat around here is open pastures, cattle pastures. There's a pond down the hill. I've got another pond over here, so water is nearby. Lots of dead nettle and white clover and trees, big blocks of trees not far away. There was a beekeeper here several years ago that was raising purebred Russians, and they retired, but they lost a lot of swarms, so we've got a healthy feral population. Those Russian strain bees seem to be pretty tough, especially after they've been living, without help for several years. So I've been really pleased with the swarms I got, and I actually did catch my biggest swarm last year from this exact tree with that exact style swarm trap. I'll go through my list here. Access, obviously it's in my yard. Habitat, very diverse, mixed, a lot of open ground. It's on a fence row, so there's a line here, which I like. And edge habitat, flight path is extremely clear, and there's water nearby, and it's shaded. So this is a good spot. Again, it's a spot that I caught bees. And another point on this one that I'd like to make is to encourage you to put a swarm trap in your yard if you can. You know, if you live in a more rural area like I do. I've got another one right up here in the driveway, and me and the kids, I pick them up from day school every day, and they are excited to check it to see if there are scout bees working it when we get home. And it's just a good way to involve kids or the family in swarm trapping, and it's just a lot of fun. I keep thinking that I'm going to see a swarm move in as I work from home, and I keep checking it out of my office window. It's just a lot of fun. So I'd encourage you to do that. All right, guys, so I got this one put up. As far as access goes, this is private land. There's a farm road right up here. Habitat is diverse. I've got a big open field here, big open field there, cattle pasture behind me. This is a block of timber. There's a block of timber, block of timber. The river is beyond those trees down there. Very diverse. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And there's white clover growing out in here, and there's actually been a honeybee flying around the truck. I guess it smells the lemongrass oil in here. So that's a really good sign. When I saw that, I actually brought out the double medium, the big trap, because there's a good chance I'll catch a swarm here. The best places to put swarm traps are often where you've caught swarms before, because you know there's bees in the area. And about 100 yards away, I caught one of my largest swarms last year, one of my two largest. And I'm going to put a trap back in that same tree, but I think this will be a really good spot, so I wanted to double up on it. As far as edge or line goes, there's a farm road right here in front of me, just a 2-track tractor trail, and this is a wood's edge. The corner is just right here. This next tree up is the corner, and then it cuts back. So I think this is very likely to get found by bees. They'll probably buzz this tree line, come around this point. So I think it's very likely to get found. It's faced on the tree this direction, which is south. You can tell there's a really clear flight path to this tree. It's very prominent looking. It does have limbs overhead, so as soon as the leaves get out, you'll have shade. And there's a creek right over here, maybe 50 yards away, and then the river is about a 1/4 mile in case this creek dries up in hot weather. So I expect to catch a swarm in this tree. In fact, I'll be surprised if number 10 does not produce a sizable swarm. So it's exciting. I love swarm trapping. It's so much fun. Let's go get the next one put out. All right, so access to this swarm trap is good. I've got a road about 20 yards away. This piece of pasture stays pretty dry. I would be a little concerned if we got several inches of rain in a week backing in here, but otherwise it's fine. Habitat is the same as the last swarm trap you saw. It's a mix of woods and pastures. There'll be some row crops down in the river bottom. Water availability is very good. There's a creek nearby, rivers nearby, there's ponds as well. This one is more shaded, so if the bees have a preference for a lot of shade versus partial shade, this one will have more shade than the last one. Also, this is a smaller trap than the last one. It is south facing. It has good clear flight path. and it's right in the edge of the woods, but it's back a little bit, and but prominent, so they've got easy flight path access. This swarm trap did produce last year. This exact tree produced one of my 2 biggest swarms of the entire year. So I'll be surprised if I don't catch a swarm in either this one or the other one I've got in this location, and I'm hoping that I'll catch swarms in both. So this location is about a mile, maybe a mile and a quarter away from my home apiary, but I believe it may be getting into another population of bees. There's a small community across the river. There may be some beekeepers over there, I'm not for sure. I do know that there is a feral population of bees in this neighborhood, and I'll be surprised if this doesn't produce. So access to this swarm trap's pretty good. I do have one gate to get through and then quite a bit of pasture to drive through. So if it rains a lot, I'll have to worry about that a bit, but otherwise it's pretty good. The habitat here is varied. I've got crop fields, pastures. The river bluff is pretty close, and there are huge blocks of timber that go for miles beyond that. So this is a very good spot, I think. As far as edge goes, this is in the corner of 2 fence rows. So I've got a fence row heading off to the north and a fence row heading off to the west, and this is on the point of the 2. Flight path is good, it's clear. This is next to a very gnarly, very big tree that is extremely prominent. So I think the bees are going to find this pretty easy. It is well shaded, and there's water nearby. There's ponds and the river. So I expect this to be a really good spot. I did catch a swarm in a tree just up here last year, and I'll be surprised if I don't catch one here this year. So I'm going to put another trap out in this location and try to double up if I can. So this swarm trap, I did catch a swarm in this tree last year. It's in a fence row, so it's got a good edge. Access is the same as the last one you saw. I've got a gate to go through. It's not a lock gate. And then quite a bit of pasture to go through, so it's a bit of a pain to get back in here. And that's why I want to put 2 out to maximize my chances of catching. If I'm going to make this drive, I want to be efficient with my time. Good diverse habitat, big blocks of timber across the river. It's a good spot. I'll be surprised again if I don't catch a swarm in this location. Now, one last thing I want to talk about would be timing of getting your swarm traps out. And of course, the climate warms for different people at different times. I'm in Tennessee, and it is March 7th right now, and henbitten dead nettle is going. Elm is probably popping out. There may be some maple coming out. Dandelions just came out in bloom this past week. Some of them still haven't bloomed. So now's a good time to get them out. I'd say that if you wait until apple blossom, you're probably a touch too late. Between apple blossom and black locust blossom, you're going to get a lot of swarms come out in that time frame, wherever you may be. So I like to have them up ahead of time, rebait the entrance with lemongrass or swarm commander frequently, about once a week, and just make sure that the bees have got time to find them and know where they're at, so that when they do swarm, they move in immediately, don't have to search. So I've got quite a few more swarm traps to put out, but I'm running out of equipment and running out of time. So I need to assemble some frames, put together some more swarm trap platforms before I can do more. So I'll have to break that into the next installment in the swarm trapping series, where I'll get the rest of the line out, and then I'll start doing a weekly check. Guys, I appreciate you watching. My goal with this series is to help new beekeepers be successful in trapping swarms, and I really hope that you guys will like this, that you'll subscribe, and that you'll share it with your beekeeping groups or friends that are interested in beekeeping. I really want to get this out and encourage people to get into beekeeping and to help new beekeepers be successful. So I appreciate it, and until next time.